Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now behind me is a car I should have had on the channel in the middle part of last year. I was actually invited by Toyota UK to fly to Spain, to Seville, to drive that car on track along with a GR86. I got as far as checking in fact I even got as far as going to the gate to go airside, and when I put my boarding pass on the little machine thing it said seek assistance, and they'd cancelled the flight. And there were no other flights to get us to Seville, and myself and the guy from Toyota basically had to turn around and go home. So I never got to drive it, and it's taken me this long to get it on the channel. Behind me is a Toyota Supra, but that one has a manual gearbox. So finally, I get my hands on the 5th generation Toyota Supra. Now, before I go any further, two things. One you'll see and one you'll hear. Firstly, you'll notice the car is filthy. And the roads, it's clearly the middle of winter, lots of salt, lots of grime, lots of flooding. And my hose pipe is frozen because it is so cold today, hence the puffer jacket and the woolly hat. So I can't actually wash the car. So it's going to have to stay dirty. You're going to have to live with it. I actually think it looks quite cool dirty anyway. And then the second thing, you might hear some banging from next door. They're having some building work done, so apologies for that. Now, if you saw my recent Toyota GR86 video, I mentioned in that film that I've in the past had two Toyota Celicas, and when I had those, I used to look up at the Supra as the next, if you like, the next longing. I wish I could have one of those cars. And actually, the first two generations of Supra were called the Celica Supra. It was only the third generation, which was the last one with the pop-up headlights, probably my favourite actually, where they separated the name, and Supra and Celica became two different model lines. And then the 4th generation Supra found fame in the Fast and Furious franchise and clearly has a massive cult following. So when this car came along, boy, were there some big shoes to fill. And I'm pretty sure it upset quite a lot of people as well. It was a collaboration with BMW, so there's a lot of similarity between this and the Z4. And under the bonnet is the mighty BMW B58 engine, the 3-litre straight-six turbocharged unit. Some impressive numbers, 335 bhp in this particular car, 450 newton meters of torque. But all the other Supras, that goes through a ZF semi-automatic gearbox, but not in this one. So what Toyota have done is taken a ZF gearbox and some of their own bits and basically fashioned together a 6-speed manual transmission that feeds through the rear wheels to provide the ultimate driver's car, really. So I can't wait to kind of talk more about that and share that with you. We've had a few challenging weather conditions this week, though. There's been a lot of flooding around where I live. So actually, one of the tests I've been able to do with this car, which is a little bit unusual, is to see what its wading depth is like. So welcome to France. We drive on the right-hand side of the road here, you know. No, we don't. It's just that my normal reviewing road is currently a river. We've had that much rainfall recently here in the UK that the little brook stroke stream that runs down the side of this road has topped its banks. And that means we've basically got a torrent of water running down the road pretty much for 3 miles. The other challenge we've got, I mean, it's warmed up a little bit here, is it's now 2 degrees, positively tropical. So it's been very, very cold. So really tricky conditions, because where the water isn't so deep, you get these, like just there, these big build-up of ice, and it's super skiddy in this car. So I think what we'll do is we'll go off and find some different roads to do the driving part of this review on, because, well, going through a flood, unless it's the Rufford Ford videos, which seem to do billions of views, isn't really that interesting. The other problem we've got, though, is this water's been on the road for so long that it's just destroying the road surface. So when this flood does subside and the waters go away, I have a horrible feeling that we're going to be left with basically a farm track. Isn't good. But happy to report, unusually, you might not think this, but a Toyota Supra actually wades through water really, really well. This is the kind of test I should have had when I had that Defender over Christmas. Oh! Now for me, styling wise, this car is a bit like one of those music tracks. When you hear it for the first time, you don't like it, and then within a couple of days, you're singing it in your head. The looks grow on you very much. There are a few things on this, especially if I compare it to GR86. I had to go with that car because the front brake calipers were a bit, I don't know, low rent. They should have been like this. Nice red ones with a bit of graphics on them. It's a very... There's kind of lots of curves. It's a very busy car. If you don't like fake vents, you're not going to like this car, because there's a little bubble that goes over the front wing here, and then there's a big fake vent in the bonnet, and then you come down the side of the car, and to prepare the side of the car for the big bulge over the rear wheel, there's a big vent here down the door, which is completely fake. I love the double bubble roof. When you look back at the car, that just makes the car look absolutely wicked. It kind of harks back to race cars of the 60s for me. And then you come round, you've got this big, bulbous rear end. You can see that in the rear view mirror. You've got a little ducktail spoiler integrated into the boot. It's a very busy rear end of the car. The lights, the way it all works together, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. And then you come down, you've got two nice big exhausts. I love this kind of F1 inspired light just here. It's an interesting rear end of the car. It's got lots of shapes. It could be a bit busy for some, but I really like it. If we just pop the boot open, so the boot is a reasonable size, 52 litre boot. The big challenge, I think, for the boot is the aperture is quite narrow here. It kind of goes into the wings, and then you can actually get access into the boot from the front passenger compartment. For me, I'd actually quite like a firewall or something there to stop stuff flying into the passenger compartment under heavy braking. But that makes the car pretty practical. But what's it like with all of that power going through the rear wheels, going through a manual box? What's it like to drive? This car will do 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. So in these chilly conditions, let's see how I got on. The floodwater's gone, but the very slippery, icy conditions remain. I don't know what it is about me. Whenever I get a hot Toyota, it always rains. It's always skiddy and not perfect. So manual Supra, what a delicious proposition that is. When these first came out, in terms of styling, I don't know, it took me a while to get my head around it, because having been a Celica owner and looked up to the Supra and just, they were just magnificent. And I remember going in the, if you like, the last gen before this, when it was first new. I had a friend who had one, and he took me up the A3 near Guildford. And I remember accelerating down the slip road onto the A3, and it just blew my mind. It was just such a quick car for the day, and it's still a quick car now. So when they relaunched the Supra, it's got big shoes to fill, right? But I've already talked about my likes for the external styling of the car. And I also talked about the fact I should have driven this car quite some time ago on track in sunny Spain, which would have been brilliant. So to get it finally here in the UK is good, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I've actually done quite a lot of miles before turning the cameras on, and I have to say, from a driving position point of view, you can get yourself really low in the car. It kind of makes you look right across the top of the bonnet, and it's a big, long, sloping bonnet. And you look out the mirrors, and you've got these big, fat haunches over the rear wheels that just look fantastic in the rear view mirror. It really does. And then driving position is good. I kind of feel like my legs are canted off to the right just a little bit. And on a longer journey, it's just given me not an ache or a pain in my left hip, but it just has a kind of a feeling that it's not quite straight. My body's not quite aligned, and I don't know whether if I ran this car for a much more prolonged period of time, I don't know, I owned one and I ran it for 6 months, whether or not that would start to become a problem. At the moment, I'm just in the normal mode, and happy to report that the gear change is really short and not cheap and lovely. You have to be quite firm and quite direct when you're changing gear and when you're putting the car in gear, but it's very rewarding when you get it right. And what I really like is that on the way up through the box, as you bring in the new gear and you lift the clutch, it's a really smooth transition into the new gear. Sometimes, even on the GR86, I found that on the upshifts was quite tricky to get a nice smooth drive. And I am a bit of a fan of a smooth drive. You'll note on the way down there, you probably didn't hear it because it's quite subtle, but there's a little auto blip on the way down. There you go, really nice, straight into second there. I've jumped inside to try and keep warm. Now, it's fair to say the interior of the Supra is fairly understated. It's certainly not an interior you get in and go, wow. That said, there are some things I really like about it. I think it's quite dominated by this steering wheel, and for me the steering wheel just feels a little bit too big. You can get it in a nice position in relation to your body, but I just think, I don't know, I don't know whether it's because the central boss is so big, it just feels really big. The main instrument binnacle in front, I really like that. It's very simple. It's dominated by a big rev counter that's quite retro. It's an analog and digital combination with a little screen to the left with your digital speed. And I like that. It's simple, it's not fussy, it just tells you what you need to know. Everything else is driven by the touch screen here, which is very much BMW inspired with their iDrive. It's a really nice place. So we've done just initial driving. The next thing to talk about is there's a button here that says Sport. And to understand what this car's like when you push on, because more power, 6-speed box, limited slip diff, it has all the ingredients to make a fantastic driver's car. Twisty roads, half a mile. So drop it down a couple of gears, maybe into third. So I popped it up into sport mode. So I guess the first thing to say about this car, having recently driven the GR86, and I talked about that car being a car that you could really rev out and drive quite hard down a B road and really enjoy yourself. This car, not so much. And that's not a bad thing. The not so much is because this car is significantly more powerful, not the stupid pheasant, significantly more powerful than the GR86. So if you really drive this car hard and rev it out through all the gears down a B road, you go really, really fast. It's a really quick car, this. And that increase in power, with it being rear-wheel drive, especially in conditions like this, I've just had the dash bong up and say it's now less than 3 degrees and slippery conditions. It's a pretty tail-happy car, this. I've got all the systems on as it happens, and I'm not intending to turn them off at all. And sadly, in this review, I won't be doing a 0 to 60 test either, because it just, when you really pin it, especially in the early gears, in first or second, the traction light comes on quite quickly. It's got a lot of grunt. So there is a big difference. This is like the GR86's kind of, big, meaner brother. You're going to go down a road an awful lot quicker in this. I'm not suggesting you're going to have more or less fun. I think you'd probably have more fun in the GR86 actually, because your license is a little bit safer. But this car's really quick, like really, really quick. So yeah, certainly compared with the GR86, you're in something a lot more powerful. But one of the things I love about spending so much time with a car and getting so many miles in is you really start to get under the skin and start to find out a few things. And one of the things I found really, really interesting about this gearbox is the engine is so torquey and so powerful that actually in most driving conditions, you don't need to use all the gears. Third and fourth are okay. And my understanding actually of this unit, if you compare it to the semi-auto ZF, is fifth and sixth are a little bit shorter than that. So you've got slightly different gear ratios. But let's just jump back in the car and talk a bit more about what this gearbox is like to use when you're driving. Oh, look, National 60 and no cars in front. So just a little bit of slip there as I accelerated away in second. The gear change is lovely, as I said, it's really notchety, but the car just sits on the road really well, brakes good. There's quite a sharp bite initially, so when you first get in the car you find yourself over braking a little bit, but you get used to that quite quickly. Here we go, some open road. Now this car's actually quite tall geared, so on a B road like this, third and fourth are really all the gears you need. Fifth and sixth are up into the cruiser, even though I'm going to go up into fifth now just to bring the revs down so it's a little bit quieter to talk to you. Let me just do an experiment. I'm just interested in this one. Let me just come down through the gears. So I'm in third. So let me get up to, so that's 60 miles an hour in third is 4,000 RPM. And 60 miles an hour in fourth is 3,000 RPM, and it redlines at 6,500. So, you know, you can, and it's got so much torque that third and fourth, you can just play between those two. You don't really need to go down as far as second. So it's just nice, you've got just the two gears that way. But it's just a car that allows you to cover ground really quickly, and the suspension setup is mega. It's not firm and crashy, it's just, it's firm enough to give you very little roll round corners, but it's compliant enough to soak up any bumps. It's a beautiful ride, this, even on the worst, grottiest B roads. And that means you can cover ground in it. It's a brilliant car on an A or a B road when you want to have some fun. So the last question is, I think we've already discovered it's got the credentials to make it a fantastic sports car. Certainly drives down a B road as good as anything I've been in recently. But what's it like on a longer journey? What would it be like to sit on, you know, a motorway at 70 miles an hour or the auto route at 140 k's an hour? What's it like on that longer journey? So, while we have a bit of a cruise on a dual carriageway, it's got cruise control but not adaptive cruise control, which is a shame. Talk about a few of the things I've noticed while I've had the car. So, first things first, it's not got a massive fuel tank. So on a full tank of fuel, you're looking at around about 270 miles of range, something around that number. And I'm averaging 29.4 miles to the gallon, which I actually don't think's bad for such a big engine car that you generally drive around quite, how do I put this, enthusiastically. But when it is cruising on a dual carriageway or motorway, it's so stable and so smooth. The steering has got a real weight to it, so it just sits there and you can have, you know, a long journey. It's not a tiring car at all. You would think with it being a sporty natured car, it would be jittery and nervous and tiring to drive, and it just really isn't. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of character. You know, you get it on a twisty bit of road and give it some Yahoo, and it sets your veins on fire with adrenaline. But when you're on a long journey like this, it's really, really relaxing, and I love that, because this is a car that you would daily, right? It's a special car, don't get me wrong, and you know, it's certainly a car that you would want to take for a nice drive on a Sunday, but I can imagine most of these are going to be used every day as a daily. Now, it's funny, I had a few comments when I put pictures of this on Instagram that the cabin looked really boring, and honestly, it doesn't feel boring to drive. It's really nicely appointed. It's got this kind of, I guess it's a faux leather on the top of the dash. It's got a bit of carbon fibre on the central console. It's got a really nicely appointed steering wheel. The steering wheel's pretty plain, really, just cruise control on the left and stereo controls on the right. There's lots of real buttons in here, so all of your climate control, you can literally just rest your hand on top of the gear stick and you can easily reach your climate controls, your main drive modes. You've got the ability to control the screen here with a, I guess that's the old iDrive system from BMW, sharing the BMW DNA from the Z4. And then that little screen, it's not too big. It's just big enough to be able to see all the information. I'm running Apple CarPlay wirelessly with my phone on a wireless charge mat. The phone's not getting too hot either, which is a good thing. Police reported ahead. Thank you, Waze. Some wireless charge mats cook phones completely. This one doesn't seem to do that. So all the things you want when you're driving along, this cabin does them all. The seats look great. They're very comfortable. Very difficult to pick fault with the car, to be honest, from a cabin point of view and from a tech point of view. So after a week and lots of miles in the Toyota Supra, what are my final thoughts? I've really enjoyed my time with this car. It's right up my street. It's a very, very clever car because it manages to do two things at once. We haven't talked about price yet, and we probably should. So the only option that car has on it is the colour, Prominence Red, which is an extra £650. And that makes that car on the road £54,500, which is a lot of money. But it's this Jekyll and Hyde trick that it plays. You're basically, for me, getting two cars in one. You're getting a sports car that you can drive at pace down a B road or go to a track day and have an amazing time. But then you've also got a long distance mile muncher that's really comfortable and quiet and smooth. And I think that's a very, very clever trick to play. The gearbox, having a 6-speed manual mated to that epic BMW engine is just a thing of beauty that we should celebrate, because it just adds to the engagement of the drive, and it's such a beautiful change, and it gives you this level of complexity to the drive, and I love it. It gives you something else to do. It gives you can always try and go for the nice best change you can and improve your driving, and I love that about manual cars. I think it looks mega. I love all the curves. I know lots of people aren't going to like the fake vents, but actually, if you just ignore the fact they're fake, it just gives the car an aggressive edge that just stands out in a car park. I probably wouldn't go for red myself, but I do think it's a good looking car. It's such a shame I haven't got to drive it on track. I've been very compromised this week. It's been so cold. The road conditions have been very icy, very wet, very muddy. I haven't really been able to push on a great deal, but who knows, maybe one day I will get it on track. But for now, I'm going to go in and get warm, and I'm going to stop sitting on this wall before I get piles. I'd love to know what you think of the Supra Manual. Put it in the comments below, but if you've enjoyed that, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come, and I'll see you on the next film, guys. You take care. Drive safe.